Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing some cards I made using Love From Lizi's March 2020 card kit. The theme is A Moment in Time, and this is a beautiful kit that could be used for masculine as well as feminine cards. As I'm recording this voiceover, the kit is still available, but quantities are limited since this is a monthly kit. There are still some add-ons available, but even those are selling out very quickly. I have provided links in the description box below if you are interested in any of the products that I show. So let's go ahead and get started with card number 1. I'm using a sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 531. The background paper is some pattern paper that has a linen look to it. And then I'm layering all of these pieces with some specialty cardstock. And this is from one of the add-on bundles. This is the Pearlescent, and I'm using the brown color. I'm just adding a couple of the brown mirror straight peel-offs to the bottom of the card for a little extra shine. And you can see I cut out a circle from that background paper, and I'll be using that later on the card, just trying to stretch that specialty paper a little bit further. So I did layer all of these pieces in that same brown pearlescent paper, and you'll notice in this video I use a ton of specialty paper this time. I think it just worked really well with all of the papers. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment, and this is included in the kit. It has a nice assortment of masculine sentiments, and then it also has some that could work for male or female. So I'm just using You Are the Best. And I'll just layer that sentiment piece on some more of the brown pearlescent paper. I cut a little fishtail on the right-hand side. And I'm going to have it flush on the left-hand side, just like in the sketch. However, for the circle element, I'm actually going to have that go behind that sentiment strip just a little bit. So I just use some solid cardstock, just a real light brown. Layered that with some more of the brown pearlescent paper, and then I'll just attach that onto the card. And then for the sentiment strip, since it's going on top of all of these other layers of paper, I want to make sure to get it nice and even, so I'm putting different thicknesses of foam dimension. So I have a little thicker on the left hand side and then those thin squares on the right hand side. And I'll just put a little bit of adhesive on the spot that's going to be on the circle. Then I'll attach that to my card front. I'll go ahead and put my card front onto a card base before I go any further. And for this card, I like all that extra white, so I am going to have that 1/8 of an inch of the card base showing. Now I pulled out one of the wooden bird cages that are included in the kit. There are 4 different styles, and I'm going to do some heat embossing on it. And I'm using a Love From Lizi's Platinum Tiara embossing powder. So first I just dipped it into my Versamark ink, and you can see my ink pad's really stained. It's the one that I generally use whenever I do heat embossing on little wood elements, so I don't mind if it's a little dirty. So I just push that into the ink and then dump the powder on top and then get my heat gun. And then while it was still hot, I dipped it back into that powder again just so I had a nice solid coverage. And then I'll just use some liquid adhesive to adhere it to the card. Now you could also leave this wood piece plain if you prefer that wood finish, or you could ink it up. I really like the look of the heat embossing since there's so many different colors and varieties. You could even have some with some glitter. So that's always fun to do, and it's super easy. So now just to finish off the card, I'm going to use some of the sequins from the kit, and I'm sticking with just the darker colors. There's a black and then a dark brown. Trying to figure out placement. I'll put 3 of them in that upper right hand corner and then just 2 in that lower left hand corner. Just adhere those using some liquid adhesive, and then that card will be all finished. And I did push the sketch out of the way so you can't actually compare the two together, but I did follow this sketch fairly closely this time. And if you are interested in any of the card sketches that I show, I do share all of that information on my coordinating blog post, and that link is in the description box below. But now moving on to card number 2. This is a sketch from MFT. It's number 477. I selected a very busy pattern paper for the background with all of this mosaic design, and I'm layering all of that in some black pearlescent paper. And then I'm using the large tag that's included in the kit. It's got craft paper, and I wanted to add just a little more color to it. And I'm using my blender brush along with some dark blue ink, and I even decided to add some ink to the twine on the tag. And then after I was looking at it, I realized I needed just a little more ink on that upper portion, just trying to even it all out. And for the 2 strips that go across the card, they'll be behind the tag. These are actually some leftover scraps from my first card. And this blue piece, I didn't have a long enough piece, so you're not going to see that little part that's cut. So I just extend it out by laying the tag on there, and now it'll all be covered up and nobody will know that that piece was too short. And you probably notice I have a deer cut out of the background. When I was first planning out this card, I was going to use the black deer, but then after I add the blue ink to the tag, it really didn't have enough contrast. So I cut out another deer using some of the white pearlescent paper. I'll just put some glue on the back and attach this to the tag. And this little geometric deer is from one of the add-on die sets. I'm going to pop up this tag using some foam dimensional tape. Make sure to get good coverage. Then I'll adhere it to the card, and I decided to put it at a slight angle just for a little extra interest. Now I'm using one of the stickers that's included in the kit. This is Be Yourself. I'm just going to put it at the lower portion of the tag, but I felt like it needed just a little something underneath it, so I'm just using one of the scraps of the peel-offs, and then I'll put that sentiment sticker right on top. That way it has something to sort of anchor itself on. Then just a finishing touch, I'm going to add some more of the sequins from the kit, still using those dark colors. I think it just worked really nicely with the rest of the card. And I'm just putting 3 of them on the card on the tag. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 2. And I'm glad I went with white paper for that deer because it really pops on that dark tag. So now moving on to card number 3. I won't be using a card sketch this time. I have 2 different pattern papers. The one in the background looks like a dark leather, and then just a wood grain for this oval. And I believe both of these papers are actually from the 6x8 pattern paper that's an add-on with the kit. And now I'll just layer that background piece using 2 different specialty cardstocks. I have the silver mirror and then also the black, it's like a satin finish. And I use that same black for the matting on that oval. Now the kit includes this really fun die set. It has all of the pieces to assemble a pocket watch. So you can change the numbers out. The original die has the Roman numerals, but you could cover those up, and it has tiny little numbers you could replace instead. And then it has another piece that you could have just with the little notches, and if you don't want any of the numbers. But for mine, I'm going to use the Roman numeral numbers. And then I'm also adding that second clock face that could be, I guess, the second hand. Sometimes you see those on a watch. And now I'm going to attach the hands. And there are 4 different sets of hands included in this die set. There's so many different varieties and ways that you could create your own little watch. And then for the chain on the watch, I did cut that out using some silver mirror paper. But first I'm going to add just a tiny brad in the center to make sure I hold the hands in place. And then I just use my scissors to snip off the chain, and then I'm going to replace it with that silver mirror paper. And I'll have it just go slightly underneath the top so it does look like it all belongs together. I'm just going to glue this to the oval using some liquid adhesive, and then I'll tuck that chain right in on top. I like how this wood grain looked behind the watch. It still has enough contrast, and it almost looks like it's laying on a floor. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up this whole oval using some foam dimensional tape. Just put that in the center of my card. And then just to add a little more interest, I cut out some small stitched circles using some more of that specialty paper. I have that black satin and then also some of the brown pearlescent paper. And on the 2 small circles, I just cut a flat end so I can have them flush against the edge of the card. And then for the sentiment, I'm pulling out another one of the stickers. And this one is Good Times. And I'm just cutting a small fishtail on the left-hand side. And then I am going to pop up this sentiment using some foam dimensional tape. Even though it is a sticker and it would adhere just fine, I thought it would look nicer to be popped up. So once I have my tape in place, I'll just put that on that lower right-hand corner, going slightly on top of that small circle. And then it's going to be flush to the right-hand side. And then just one finishing touch, I'm going to use some black Nuvo drops. This was in a previous Love From Lizi kit. It might have been from last year. And there is my finished card, and I really like how this one turned out. That die set is so much fun. So now moving on to card number 4. I'm using a sketch from Viva La Verbe. This is their June 2016 sketch. For this rectangle piece on the sketch, I'm using this cut apart that was on one of the 12 by 12 pattern paper sheets that's included in the kit. It looks like a wood picture frame. And just to add a little extra interest, I'm using some brown mirror peel-offs and just adding the thinnest width on the very inside of that wood frame, just for a little extra shine. And then I'll layer this on some brown pearlescent paper. Now for these 3 thin banners that go down the middle of the card, I cut these out using some gold satin mirror paper. Just doing a little fishtail on the end of each of them. And then the background paper, I selected this floral design that has a wood panel in the background. Just rounded the 2 corners, layer that on some of the brown pearlescent paper, and then I'll adhere these 3 thin banners. And they were pretty easy to get them nice and straight because there's those lines in the background on that paper. And then once I get all of those evenly spaced and attached, I'm going to go ahead and stamp a sentiment on the inside of this frame. So one of the sentiments that's included in the kit has "I love you just as you are." I think that's one of my favorite sentiments, and I'll probably be using that one quite a bit. So I'm going to stamp that in the lower corner of this frame, and I just want to make sure I got a good stamped impression, so I did use my Mini Misty. So before I work any further on this card, I'm going to attach my card front onto a card base, and I did make sure to round the corners on the card base as well. And then I'm going to pop up this rectangle piece using some foam dimensional tape. I'll just adhere that to the card. And then for some embellishment on this card, I'm using some more of the cut aparts. Now this sheet, you'll have to cut all of those out yourself. You'll have to do a little bit of fussy cutting. So I've already done the cutting on 4 of the pieces, and I'll just show you real quick how I'm doing it with the other 2. Just leaving that real thin edge around it so it makes it look like it's an ephemera piece. So now I have all of my pieces to work with. I'm going to put together this little floral bouquet. Have a few of the leaves kind of poking out of the edges. So once I like how it looks, I can start adhering the pieces down, working with the ones that will be in the back first, and then just slowly building up my bouquet. I had considered even popping up a few of the flowers, but I think there was already enough dimension going on with this card that I didn't need any extra. So I'll just attach that final flower. And then to finish off this card, I'm going to use some of the sequins. Pulled out those dark colors again and put those in that lower corner. Then I decided to put a couple of them up near the sentiment as well. I use some of the lighter colors there. Really trying to decide where I want to do the placement. Since this background paper is already very busy, I don't want to add anything that's just going to sort of blend into it. So I like the darker color on that background paper. But I think the lighter color sequins add a nice softness by the sentiment. And then I decided to add just a little bit of glitter to all of the flowers. So I just have the clear Wink of Stella glitter pen. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 4. Now moving on to card number 5, and I'm gonna get a little bit messy this time. So I have some watercolor paper, and then I'm using the Storm Cloud shimmer powder that's included in the kit. I just spritz some water all over this paper, and then I'm just sort of sprinkling the powder on top. And then I'll add a little bit more water, and you can just see all of that beautiful color start to move. Then I'll just add more water or more powder until I get the look that I really want. And I will just dab off some of the extra water because it does sort of drip down on the sides. Add some more powder and some more water. And then I did let this dry for a full 12 hours before I started. And here you can see the finished result, and it has this beautiful kind of a metallic shimmer look to it. I cut out a stitched circle die cut using that beautiful background paper, and now I'll start assembling this card. I'm using a sketch from Sweet Sunday. This is number 286. For the background paper, I have some of that gold satin specialty paper, and then using some more of this beautiful feather pattern paper for the background, just layering it in some black cardstock. And then I just use a thin piece of some pattern paper that looks like a wood panel for this strip that goes on the right hand side. And then I did just put some scraps of cardstock underneath the top and lower portion of that thin strip just to keep it all nice and even on the card. And now I'm using some peel-offs just to add a little extra sparkle to the edge of this strip, and I only had to put them on the top and bottom portion since that whole middle is going to be covered up with this circle. So since I did use some watercolor paper and got it nice and wet, it does warp the paper slightly, so I am using some score tape on the back side and then also some liquid adhesive. I just want to make sure it lays nice and flat on the card. I'll adhere that to my card front, and I think it had enough contrast that I didn't have to worry about adding a matted circle behind it. So now I pulled out some of these alphabet wood letters that are included in the kit. One side has the wood finish, and then the other side, what I thought at first was a whitewash, it's actually some paper backing. So they do have adhesive on the back side. I'm going to do some heat embossing. I used some Golden Crown embossing powder. And I'm not going to show you me embossing all of these letters because that took a little bit of time. And then I just peeled off that paper backing. And now I can start assembling my sentiment. And this is one of my favorite sentiments since it works for any kind of card. A happy hello. And I've already gone ahead and peeled off the backing on the rest of those letters, and I'm just laying them lightly on the card so I can get the placement correct. And even though there is adhesive on the back side, I'm not sure how well it'll adhere with that shimmer powder, so I am going to add some liquid adhesive as well. And I didn't line up all the letters perfectly straight. I think it adds a little more interest, plus I don't always do a great job at getting my sentiment letters nice and straight. So then just finishing off this card, I'm using some more of the black Nuvo drops, just putting a few of them around the sentiment and then also some in that upper right hand corner. So there is my finished card, and I love how this one turned out. That shimmer powder was so much fun to use. So now moving on to card number 6. I'm using one of the cut-aparts that's on the 12 by 12 paper, and then the back side of the 12 by 12 paper has the large mosaic pattern. So I thought it'd be fun to use that as the background of the card. So just to add a little extra interest, I'm using some silver peel-offs and putting them all around the outside edge of this background piece, letting them go off of the edge just slightly. And then I'm going to use a little X-Acto knife and then just sort of miter the corners together. Give it a little bit of a frame. And I'll do that to all of the corners. And of course, these tiny little pieces keep getting stuck to my fingers. And then I'll layer that whole panel on some of the black pearlescent paper. I love this, that little extra shine. You could also do the same thing by adding some more specialty paper, doing a silver mirror. But sometimes it's nice to just do that with the peel-offs. And Lizi sells so many different colors that you could have a nice variety of peel-offs and styles. And then using the same silver peel-offs, although this time I'm going to use the thinnest width, I put one on that inside wood frame on that cut apart. Then using another one of the geometric animal die cuts, this one is a little owl. I cut it out using some of that black pearlescent paper, but this time I wanted to keep most of those little pieces attached. So I'm just putting some score tape pieces all along the back side, and the only pieces that I wanted popped out were the eyes. So I had a couple pieces that still popped out on their own, and I just put them back in place. Go ahead and add my cut apart sentiment to my card panel. I'm going to continue with the peel-offs going all around that inside of the wood frame, and then the owl is going to sit in that lower right hand corner. So I don't actually need the peel-offs to go all the way down because it's going to be covered up. Then I did decide to pop up this owl using some foam dimensional tape, so I'm just cutting some tiny little pieces to make sure I get good coverage. I don't want any of those small pieces of the die to actually come out later. I'll just attach that to my card. I'll put my card front onto a card base. And then just a finishing touch for this card, I decided to add a couple of small banners in that upper left-hand corner. I have a longer one cut out of some black pearlescent paper, and then the shorter one is using some silver satin mirror paper. And I just put a small piece of scrap cardstock underneath the top portion, just keeping everything nice and even. And I did get a little bit of glue on that silver paper, but it wiped off real easily, so no worries there. Attach both of those using some liquid adhesive. And there is my finished card. Even though it's a very simple design, I think adding just those extra little elements like the peel-offs and the die cut really make it stand out. So now moving on to cards 7 and 8. I used a piece of the 6x8 paper that was included in one of the add-on packs, and I loved the beautiful scene with the stars, and then it has the little forest in the background, but it's too large for a card unless you want to make a 6x8 card. So I decided to cut it in half, and then I'm going to make 2 different little scene cards instead. So for the bottom portion, I'm using some of the Blue Sky Sway peel off. I'm just putting one of them on the very lower edge just to add a little extra shine. And I'm layering both of these panels using some gold mirror paper and then also some of the dark blue cardstock that's included in the kit. But for the second card, I still want to have some ground. So I cut out a few little stitched hillsides using that same blue cardstock and then just attach them to the bottom. So now it looks like a sky scene, just a really large moon. You can see I have a couple animals cut out of the background with that mirror paper, so I will be including those later on this card. But first I'm going to work on a couple of sentiments. And there are the little animals. So I have a fox, a rabbit, and then a little bear. And I do want to keep the inside pieces for both of these because I think it adds a little extra shine. So I've already gone ahead and put the score tape on the back. Since it does take a little while, I like to get good coverage, so I use a lot of tiny little pieces. And then before adhering the bear, I did decide to put some small foam squares just on that upper portion just to add a little extra dimension. Now for the rabbit and the wolf, I'm just going to adhere those flat to the card since I don't have those extra layers from the hillsides. I'm not sure about proportion because that rabbit is quite large compared to the wolf. But I still liked the two because they were facing each other. I think it made it look a little better. And they're probably friends. I don't think that wolf is actually out there hunting that rabbit. Now for the sentiment, I'm going to use a couple different stamps. So the one nice thing about this stamp set is you can use one part that has 2 my, and then you could add an assortment of different words. So for mine, I'm going to use dad, and then on the other one, I'm going to use the word friend. I'm just trying to get them nice and straight on my block before I stamp them. And I'm just using some black ink. So for the card on the right, it'll have to my dad, and then the card on the left will be to my friend. After I remove the word dad, now I'm just replacing it with the word friend. And the stamp set has quite a few of different masculine terms. So you could have brother, has partner, husband. So it's a really nice stamp set because it has those masculine sentiments as well as just a general sentiment like this one where it's to my friend. Now I'm just adding some thin foam dimension on the back side. I decided not to layer these in any additional cardstock because I really don't want them to be the focal point. Kind of want them to sort of blend into the sky. And then after I have both of those attached, I thought that bear looked really lonely, so I cut out a little friend for him, attached him to the card, plus I gave it a nicer balance to the overall card. Now just some finishing touches, I'm going to add some sequins to both of the cards. On the one to my dad, I'll use the darker sequins, and then on the other card, I'll use more of those cream colored, peach colored sequins. I'll just use some liquid adhesive to adhere them, putting a couple of them underneath the sentiment and then just a few in that lower right hand corner. On the first card with the rabbit, I didn't like the look of the sequins in the bottom corner, but then after I had it all finished, I thought it still looked a little off, so I did end up adding just 2 small sequins behind the rabbit, and you will see that in the still shot photo that I'll be sharing here in just a moment. So there are my 2 cards. I love how these turned out. I think those geometric animals look really nice in that specialty gold mirror paper. So now moving on to card number 9. This is a sketch from I Heart Sketches. It's number 55. I wanted to make sure to use this beautiful washi tape that's included in the kit, and it is translucent just a little bit, so I want to make sure that you'll still be able to see that color. I'm just adhering it to a scrap of that linen pattern paper, and that way you can now see that nice design. But it really blends into this background paper, so I'm using some of the brown mirror straight peel-offs just to add some contrast and then also some lovely shine. And I cut out this scallop border to go along the top portion of the card, following this sketch fairly closely this time. And then I just have a thin strip of this wood panel pattern paper to put above that scallop border. I just snipped off that extra because it was a little bit too long. And I'll attach this onto some of the brown pearlescent paper. I'm pretty sure I use specialty paper on every single card this time. You can tell I really like it. So I'll put my card front onto a card base. And then I used one of these cut-aparts. This is a small one. It's about 2 by 3 inches. Just layered that in some black cardstock. And I love this kind of a wreath-looking design. This has sort of a watercolor look on the background. So I'm just going to adhere that onto the card. I did use a scrap of cardstock for that upper portion, just to keep everything nice and even. And then I'm going to be including the word hi, using some more of those wood letters. And I was going to just keep that natural wood look, but I decided it needed a little shine. So I pulled out the Oyster Pearl Embossing Powder by Love From Lizi, and it just adds a slight amount of color, kind of a pearl look, and then that beautiful shine. So I did that to both of the letters. And I'll just peel off that backing. And then even though this is adhering to paper, I still just want to make sure it's going to stay in place. So I do add just a little bit of liquid adhesive to the back side. So there are 3 full sets of the alphabets, and I have now used up all of the H's. So next time I use the alphabet, I'll have to come up with another word that doesn't start with the letter H. And then just some finishing touches for this card. I'm using some more of the sequins. I used 3 of the large black sequins on the right hand side of the card, just following the sketch. And then I decided to add some of the smaller cream colored sequins just to put around this little sentiment box. I have one in each of the corners. And there is my finished card, and this is card number 9. Now moving on to card number 10. This is a sketch from MFT. It's number 230. I have some blue kind of tone-on-tone distress paper for the background. And then for this smaller element, I have the back side of one of the 12 by 12 papers that has wood panels and then a bunch of just real muted floral design. And I layered both of those pieces using some of the silver mirror cardstock. I'll just add my card front onto a card base. And now I'm going to use the last tag that's included in the kit. And I'm going to stamp the little dream catcher. And I'm going to do some heat embossing with it. This time using the warm navy color. And all of my embossing powders that I've been using are by Love From Lizi. So I did treat that paper first with some anti-static powder, just to make sure I don't get any stray pieces anywhere. And I'll just heat set that, and you can see that beautiful shine. Then I'll just add some foam dimensional tape on the back side of this tag, adhere it to my card. And then for this banner strip that goes across the front of the tag in the sketch, I'm going to use some of this leftover pattern paper that has the feathers on it. You're not really going to be able to see the feathers very much because I'm going to put a sentiment in the center. But I like that it still has all of those same colors from the other pattern papers, and it just kind of ties it all together. Then I used one of the sentiment stickers. This reads, "Love this story." Just layer that with some more blue paper. And then I'll just add some foam dimensional tape on the parts where it's going over that tag, just to keep it all nice and even. And I'll just use some adhesive on the little portion where it's actually touching the tag. And then instead of having that larger circle, I decided to cut out 3 small circles using some of the wood grain pattern paper. And I'm just going to put those on that left-hand corner. And then just a finishing touch, I'm going to use some Nouveau crystal drops. This was from a previous Love From Lizi kit in a nice cream color. Putting some of them around that image on the tag and then one on either side of the sentiment. So there is my finished card, and that is card number 10. Then moving on to card number 11, I'm going to use a sketch from OWH. This is number 34. I've selected 3 different pattern papers. I'm just layering all of them in some black cardstock. That background piece has a bunch of wood panels, and then this smaller piece has an assortment of wood letters. At least they look like wood. And they're not forming any words or anything because it even has symbols and numbers. And I'll actually be covering up most of that, but I liked all the different colors in that paper. So let's go ahead and put my card front onto a card base. And for this card, I'm going to be assembling another one of the stopwatches. So I'm just putting it on some of the cream cardstock that's included in the kit. But I'm not going to have it as a stopwatch this time. I'm going to cut off that chain. So this time it is just, I guess it still could be a stopwatch because it still has the little piece on the top, but just no chain. So I have it cut out of some of the gold mirror paper. And I'm sticking with those Roman numerals. I like the look of them. I'll just adhere that to the paper. And then I cut out a different style of the clock hands. And they have a big enough hole in the center that when you put a brad through them, you'll still be able to move them around. So I'm just going to hold those together, push the brad through, and then close it up with the ends. But I had it a little too tight because I couldn't move the hands at all, so I did loosen up that brad just a little bit. And then I'll pop up that whole piece using some foam dimensional tape. That way there isn't that little bump in the middle from the brad, the little ends of the brad. And now for the sentiment, this is the top portion of one of the cut-aparts. It reads, "It's your time," but I decided to cut it all apart. So first I thought about keeping it together and just trimming off the extra, but it just looked lost on the card, I think, with all of that black. So instead I snipped off the word time, and then I even trimmed it down a little bit more. To figure out placement, but I decided to still just kind of stick with it in that upper left hand corner. And then I'll just pop it up using some more of the foam dimensional tape. And then once I have that sentiment down, I noticed the letters in that pattern paper directly below the word time. It has the IFAR, and it it's just a little distracting. So I decided to cover that up. So I'm just adding a small banner out of some brown pearlescent paper, and I'm just going to adhere it kind of right in the middle. So now it doesn't look like any other word, even though it wasn't really a word before. And then just finishing off the card, I'm adding some more of the black Nuvo crystal drops. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 11. So now moving on to my final card. This is card number 12. I realized I hadn't used very many of the image stamps, and I really wanted to use the feathers that are on this stamp set because they're so beautiful. So I pulled out the gray cardstock that's included in the kit, and then there's two different feather stamps. There's the large one that has a lot of detail, and then a small one that's just a little silhouette. So first I inked the edges of this gray paper with some blue ink, just to add a little extra color. And now I'm going to stamp an assortment of the feathers all over the background, just using some black ink. I'm going to start with the large feather, and I'm just stamping it randomly. I have most of them going off the edge, and then I'll fill in all those little gaps with the small feather. I love the detail on that large feather. It's so pretty. And now I'm going to use some of the clear mirror silver peel-offs. I always forget the name of these, but they're one of my favorites. Then using the medium width, I'm putting one just to the inside edge all around the outside. So it's going to add this beautiful silver frame look. And I am cutting the peel-offs just a little bit longer than needed, and then I'll just tuck all of those ends behind. You could just cut them off even on the edges, but I always like to tuck them behind whenever possible, just to make sure they're not going to peel off later on the card. And then I'll just layer this with some black cardstock. And then I'm going to use one of the longer sentiments. This is one of the stickers. It reads, "Be who you want to be." I'm going to put that on some black cardstock, trim about 1/8 of an inch on each edge, and then add the thinnest width of those same silver peel-offs. I'm just putting it right next to that sentiment. That way it's matching with that background of the card. And then I'll just tuck those ends behind and then adhere it straight onto that panel. I decided not to pop it up this time. I'll put my card front onto a card base. And then just a few finishing touches for this card. I'm going to add a small black banner in that upper right-hand corner. And then pulling out some of the sequins. I'm trying to decide which size and which color, where I want to place them all. So after I fuss with those quite a bit, I end up using just the flat sequins. Some of them are a dark blue, and then some of them are black. I think it just kind of depends on the way the light hits them. And I just add those randomly in the background in between all of those feathers. I always try to remember to make at least a few cards that are nice and flat. That way it's less money to put them through the mail. So there is my finished card, and this is card number 12. And I really love this feather stamp. It's just so beautiful. Now here's just a quick recap of the 12 cards I made using Love From Lizi's March 2020 card kit. As I'm recording this voiceover, the kit is still available, but it is a monthly kit and they do tend to sell out very quickly. If you are interested, I have provided links in the description box for the kit as well as the add-ons. Although many of those add-ons are sold out already. So here's everything that I still have left over from the kit. So I still have one full sheet of cardstock and then quite a bit of the other colors. I have one more of the pearlescent papers. Here's what's left of the 12 by 12 paper. Lots of cut aparts still available. Some small scraps of the 6 by 6 paper, and I still have 4 full sheets. Most of those sentiment stickers. There's the washi tape. Of course, the Nuvo shimmer powder. There's 3 of the bird cages, quite a bit of the sequin mix, and then lots of the alphabet letters, just no H's. There's that beautiful stamp set, which I have upside down and did not notice. And then there's the peel-offs and then also the die set. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.